Hi, welcome back. This is Seekers and Cynics. I'm Richard Bentley. This is Bodmin Road Church in Hull. And last couple of weeks we've been thinking about faith and belief, particularly thinking about the Christian view of the world and the atheist view of the world. And I just want to sort of wrap up some of those thoughts today. Someone on a YouTube comment said something along the lines of, why should I have any belief in God when there isn't a shred of evidence? Something to that effect. And so what I thought I would do today, I've done this before, but in a nutshell today, is just point to some of the evidence which does suggest God's existence. Now, of course, it is evidence, it's not proof. We can't prove this stuff either way. That's what I've been arguing all along, that these are matters of belief. But both sides of the coin, atheism and Christianity, these are not matters which can be settled by science. They aren't in that category. And therefore, we can't prove things either way. But there is evidence. Now, let me say straight away, there is evidence that suggests God's non-existence. Straight away, let's say, how, if God is all-powerful and all-loving, can the world be full of so much pain and suffering? That is a very solid plank in the argument against God's existence, and I accept that. So, there's evidence both ways, and we've looked at that elsewhere. But what I want to do now is just come back and say, actually, to say there isn't a shred of evidence for God is naive. And I want to point very quickly to four areas. We can't do them in detail because this is a quick overview where there is evidence for God. The first two are going to be areas of the physical and biological realm where science has not yet provided any explanation of the phenomena that we observe. Description, yes, but explanation, no, and there's a significant difference. And what that means is that the scientific view does not explain the existence of this universe or a number of phenomena within it. I am scientifically trained. I've got a first-class degree in mathematics and physics. Leeds University, 1988, nowhere special, but it'll do. And that does mean that I understand the nature of science and what science can and cannot do. And the first thing science does not do and cannot do is explain the origin of the universe. Okay? I believe in Big Bang Theory. I think it gives a very good description of the history of the universe right back to whatever it is, 10 to the minus 31 seconds, the Planck time. But there is nothing within our current scientific understanding that can explain why the Big Bang should bang, or why it went bang in such a way as to create an inhabitable universe, the chances of which are enormous squared to one against. There is no explanation at all within scientific theory as to why that should have happened. Only some description of the processes. You cannot get back behind time t equals naught. And so Stephen Hawking has to say in his most recent book, the universe created itself. If that isn't a statement of faith, if that isn't a statement of belief, if that isn't a statement which in no way has any scientific underpinning, I don't know what is. The universe created itself. How does something which doesn't exist do anything? How does something which doesn't exist create itself? I cannot pick myself up by my own bootlaces. It's not possible. Neither can something which does not exist act in such a way as to create itself. It's nonsense. And there it is in the book of a top Cambridge mathematical physicist who in other areas is absolutely excellent and far more intelligent than I am. But that statement is a statement of faith, not of science. The universe created itself. And it's an admission that science has no explanation for what happened, only a description. And I've looked at the Big Bang elsewhere. And that leaves plenty of room for a complementary view of the universe, which has God as creator, using Big Bang processes, for whatever reasons, using those processes, but nevertheless, God himself being the initiator, the first cause, the creator, the planner behind all of it. The second phenomenon area that science simply cannot, and somewhere in the office over there, and I've not whipped it out, I have a front cover of New Scientist from last year, which says something like, science can explain everything except us. What science has no explanation for is human consciousness and human free will. And so many of those human qualities, our appreciation of beauty, our morality, so many of those subtle and nuanced aspects of our humanity, science cannot explain how, if we are purely material beings, atoms and molecules of carbon and hydrogen and nitrogen and whatever, that we should come to acquire those qualities. Just the movement of your arm, which we so take for granted, is a mysterious thing. How does that happen? On a scientific view of cause and effect, if you trace the process back through the nervous system into the brain, cause and effect for every process, what is the first cause? What is the thought? What is the movement of electrons and atoms in your brain that causes your arm to lift? And is that freely chosen? And that is such a mysterious thing that many top atheists, Sam Harris for example, have denied the existence of free will. They will tell you that your free will is an illusion. Because free will, in the Christian view, is the gift of God. It is the supernatural ability, more than just our material substance, to do things by choice, to lift my arm because I choose to. But on a purely materialistic view of cause and effect and determinism, there is no explanation of my lifting my arm except the retracing of molecular collisions back to the beginning of time. And therefore your free will is an illusion. That is a consequence of atheism. And so science has no real, proper, decent understanding of consciousness, free will. There's massive evidence there that there might just be a God who has made us in his own image. My time is ticking away. The other two areas I wanted to mention were the whole evidence for the life of Jesus Christ, the New Testament, its historicity, and the evidence for his life. Some people just poo-poo that as a fairy tale, as a myth. It is naive to do that. You ought to grapple with the data, the New Testament data and the historical data around the person of Jesus Christ. Famous lawyer Frank Morrison once did that around the resurrection, setting out to disprove it. And as a lawyer, an intelligent man, became convinced by the evidence. Now, you might not agree with his conclusion, but there's no denying that there is evidence. For if there were no evidence, a lawyer such as Frank Morrison would not have been convinced. There is evidence for Jesus, for the resurrection, and for all of that. And the fourth area where there is clear evidence for Christianity is the testimony, the personal stories of answered prayer and all sorts of things in millions of Christian lives, both today and over the centuries. Now, any one of those I accept you could write off as coincidence. I can tell you one or two things in my life that have been rather unusual that I would suggest was the finger of God, that had God's fingerprints on it. And you could say, well, that's just coincidence, Richard. And indeed, as a mathematician, I have to accept that it could be, because many things that are highly improbable do happen every day. However, when you take the combined testimony of millions of Christians, all pointing to small and sometimes large interventions of God in their lives, particularly in answer to prayer, one has to conclude that there is there again a weight of evidence, not of proof. All of this is about the lens through which we look. I accept it is possible to look at the universe through the lens that says there is no God. I accept that that is possible and you can see the universe that way. I choose as a Christian to look at the universe through the lens of faith, and in doing that I can see God's fingerprints in many different places. Not proof, but evidence of his existence. I think what both the Christian and the atheist have to be aware of is that we are both choosing the lens through which we look. No one is looking, if you like, cleanly and unbiasedly at the evidence. We are both choosing the lens through which we look. It's not about intelligence. There are a great many intelligent atheists, and there have been and are today a great many very intelligent Christians too. It's not about intelligence. God is leaving room for faith. He doesn't prove himself to those who are not interested or wishing to believe with cheap, showy proof. That's not his style. Jesus didn't go around after the resurrection to his enemies and say, "Hey, look at me, I'm alive." God will not give you cheap proof. He waits to be sought. He looks for the humble seeker. Jesus said those who seek will find. And God leaves room for faith. And in leaving room for faith, that also leaves room for doubt. But to suggest that the only evidence that exists is on the side of doubt is grossly naive, as I hope I've just very briefly outlined. I'll see you next time.